Hello, lovely people. My name is Joy Tanner. I am the editor of Performers Magazine, and I have some very special guests in our virtual room today. Many of them are my dear friends, so I'm very, very excited to introduce you to the creative team of Junior's Giant, the award-winning film, for our spotlight today. In the house, we have my dear friend Deb McGrath, who is the brainchild, the screenwriter and producer of this very personal movie. As well, we have her breakout and beautiful star, Kinley Mochrie, who will also be moderating today's spotlight. So there's no pressure on you, Kinley, whatsoever. As well, we have Canadian icon Eric Peterson, who joins us from the sub-annex, as he puts it. Eric.
Property values in Seton Village are going to plummet after I said that. God, I ruined my old house. Oh my God.
Eric,
the Seton Village Housing Committee will be after me today for a minute.
I don't think they're the only people that are going to be after you after this interview, but please welcome Eric as well. And my dear friend, Canadian star and sweetheart, Canadian sweetheart, and heading the helm of this creative team in the director's chair, my friend, Paula Brancati. Paula, welcome. I think this is going to be our most entertaining spotlight to date. So sit back, enjoy the ride. I can't wait to hear where this goes. And I'm going to pass the baton off to Kinley. Kinley, take it away.
Thank you, Joy. Very excited to be leading moderation today. I got some hard-hitting questions for everybody. Let's get right into it. We're going to start with a question for Eric. Yes, for you. Are you ready?
Sorry, Kinley. Are you wearing hands on your ears?
Yes. For if you're listening at home without the picture, we are. Yeah, I'm wearing some hand earrings.
Hand earrings,
and they're quite
great, man. They're great. They look
quite big. Thank you. The Outstanding Performance Awards nominees and winners are decided by a jury comprised of ACTRA Toronto members. How does it feel to be honored by a jury of your peers?
Oh, it's. I mean, obviously, it was surprising for one thing, and it was wonderful. I felt incredibly honored by it, and as usual, undeserving. But that's I've been in therapy for years trying to trying to get over that one where you get a prize and you go, you know what, they gave it to the wrong guy. It's just a matter of time until I'm found out to be a terrible actor. I don't know what happened. Somehow that I seem to sneak through here and get an award or something for it or get praised for it, and I'm totally undeserving. But having said that, having made a kind of fool of myself and revealed the deeper and darker secrets, not only of Seton Village and the sub-annex, but of myself, I would like to say that it was, when you're an actor, you do parts, you do thousands of parts, or 10 or thousands, but there's always ones that are, when you're shooting them or in a play and working on them, something's kind of clicking with you, in a way that it's kind of falling into some sort of aspect of your personality, your brain, your experience, whatever that is that we work with, that's in your wheelhouse, as it were. You feel a kind of comfort in this. You feel that you're not completely lost somehow with what's going on. That there's and who knows? I mean, I'm saying that as the actor. So I have to admit that this part, I just went, yeah, I'd like to do this part. I'd like to do this part because of, not even articulating, something in my soul went, oh, yeah, I'd like to do this part. But then there's and then you can work back. You could probably analyze why that is. And I mean, for me, always in acting is the first, the thing that's really going to set it off is, if it's going to be successful, is the writing. You can't act we spend a lot of time. I'm sorry, I'm gonna badmouth some other people now. So no, I'm not gonna badmouth anybody. I'm just saying that you spend a lot of time in this business trying to kind of, as an actor, in certain areas of this business, trying to make something better that isn't very good to start with, or that's difficult. It's not making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. It's more making a plastic purse out of a sow's ear. Perhaps this is closer to the truth of that. But there's also writing that you go, this is like driving a wonderful car. I don't have to do much, and I'm just zipping along here. Everything I need to know about this character is in the writing of it. So I'm not making stuff up and going, oh, well, I would do it this way or whatever. It's just there. And with Deb's script, that was with Junior, that there was a kind of authenticity and authority about this script that was, dare I say it, kind of easy to do for me. And in the end, it turns out it worked out well. It worked out well. People loved it. I got an award for it, which is wonderful too. But it was a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful experience shooting it, and being. I was very honored to be doing it. Very conscious of the fact that this was a real person that two of my colleagues on the screen were well aware of who he was, and yet giving me the license to go do what you do with what you want. So that's the short answer. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what the question was again. Now I think I've answered it. Over to you.
You did.
Over to you.
You did answer it. Okay, thank you very much. God knows we were so honored to have you be a part of the film too, Eric, and you were certainly, just to be clear, you were certainly deserving of the award.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It means everything to me. I mean, it's so we positive feedback in this business is really the best. It's the best part of
it. This one's for everyone. What does it mean to you to be an ACTRA member?
I have a quick answer to that. When I was coming up in the business, I know things have changed and things are precarious now, to say the very least. And we've got a lot of non-union folks who are working and making good livings, and I'm saying nothing against them. They're not joining the union for their own reasons, and of course we're trying to help them to realize what you can benefit by being a member of ACTRA. But when I was coming up, it was the only thing to me and my peers, my friends, that said, I'm a professional actor. When I started, it was theater. I went to theater school, and slowly when, television and things came along, that was the goal. That was what everyone wanted. It was, finally, I've got a union card, I'm credible. So that's what it meant to me. And that's what it still means to me. I work for the union, and that was a wake-up call. So many of us spent our early days, what does the union do? What's it up to? Why is this? Why is that? Joined and found out exactly what it does and how hard it is to solve problems, how hard it is to make everyone happy, and what an honor it is to serve the membership. So I'm very proud to be a union member. Came from a union family. My mother was a bookbinder, and I just saw a woman in that industry. Can't imagine what would have happened to her without a union as a bookbinder, a male bastion. And she was a very attractive woman. I mean, she still had her problems because Me Too hadn't happened, but that wasn't a short answer at all. I just joined you, Eric, in the lengthy answer.
Good. I'm glad. I was feeling a bit lonely in here. Paula, it's up to you now to give the longer answer.
And we know I am not succinct. So let's see everyone
There's a
buckle
small
up.
contest being run here. Who can give the longest answer?
Oh, I'm sure I'll win at some point.
Yeah, I think I think for me, because I started acting so young, I was 8 when I started acting professionally. I think I just knew that being an ACTRA member, once I got those credits, it meant that I could keep doing this. And also because I was so little, it was also ACTRA that protected me in terms of being able to be at school at the same time. And I was such a like nerdy A+ student who was like, we need to push calls so I can get my 2 hours of tutoring. And like, I would do that as a child actor. And I knew that there was something in place that allowed me to have both of these lives. And I like love the first thing I ever loved watching was General Hospital with my grandmother, and we would watch it every day after school. It's how she learned English. And I thought, if I can do that and be in people's houses every day, I'll be so lucky. Like, I just thought it was the coolest thing to be with people every day on their screen. So when I got my first ACTRA job, which was an Airheads commercial, it's a great candy if you're hungry. That was like step one for me. I was like, this Airheads commercial could lead to that, could lead to me being on a show that's in people's houses every day. So it felt very hopeful. And it was like, you know, the beginning of a real lifelong love and journey and feeling, you know, protected at work, basically. So I'm very grateful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Was that it was medium.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
Very good, though. It was very good. Both of those were very good.
Thank you so much.
Those were excellent, revealing, you know, from the heart, from the mind answers.
We're workshopping it. We're giving notes.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I have to admit that my relation, I'm overwhelmingly, what's the word I want? Not relieved. I'm overwhelmingly grateful that I'm part of, you know, I have this union, ACTRA. And my time working on council and that, the couple of, you know, terms I did, it was a total eye-opener for me that especially that, you know, not only the kind of democratic, as we all sat around and, you know, who was working, who wasn't working, and all the gossip and everything at council meetings, as well as trying to talk about issues, but the staff at ACTRA, the kind of research, the kind of ability that this union has to punch way above its weight as far as the kind of data and information and policy and strategies in a world that is absolutely ruthless out there, and we're such a small player in it. It makes one feel much bigger and far more secure to know that you have this kind of expertise that you're part of and part of. And I mean, I have my own old fart kind of, you know, hobby horses about, you know, what's going on and how the business is going in this country. But and to a certain extent, you know, critical of ACTRA's stand on some things, but in general, I can't imagine a world without having this union. If you're a working person, if you're in this business, and then as we're seeing, not only in our own business, but across the board for people and employment, you know, AI is presenting a huge problem. It's going, and it seems to be coming down there. So the fact that we humans have gathered together is kind of, you know, as we're being hunted down and exterminated by the new technologies. I hope I'm not overstating that, my alarm on that, but it's you know. And the other thing I want to talk to is Deb's point, actually working. You know, before I was really heavily involved with ACTRA, you know, so much of the time is about bitching. What's the union doing about this? I don't understand why this is happening. There should be something about this. You know, it was so great to get on and go to see what was possible to do, which was a huge eye opener, because you think, well, I don't know. Why isn't ACTRA getting me all the big parts? I don't see why that isn't happening. What do you think I pay my dues for? I should be a star of everything that's being shot up here. And to get disillusioned from that, as well as to see what's possible, and then to see to see how well we were doing in the range of possible things that we could improve for the membership. It's just a tremendous organization.
Yes, agreed. Young one?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try and go for the shortest answer.
Don't do that now.
Well, I think it's funny because in the questions it has me referring to you as Deb. I'm still gonna just say to my mom's point about feeling like a professional. That spoke to me when you said that. I hadn't really thought of that, but that I think is a piece for me, and just feeling protected. I think that's ultimately it. And there we go. That's how you do it, everybody.
I'm
I
shamed.
can't compute that short. I'm like, oh my God, that's it.
And Eric, I just
Beautiful.
want to pose another question. Are you sure none of us is AI? Are you positive that we're
Oh my God.
really?
And then Deb goes,
Yeah, it explodes.
that's my worst night.
Yeah, a lot of discussion in ACTRA about AI, and it's terrifying. And Colin and I last night watched the series Smartless, and they started talking about AI. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Anyway, just throwing that in there.
I'm too scared to talk. Yeah, well, I will just have to band together on street corners and do plays, and I guess I don't know.
Exactly.
Stop people at the shopping center and go here. That
At
means
Seton Village, we'll do it sort of.
Exactly.
I don't know.
But before we go on, I just want to say I didn't mean for this dramatic lighting I've got going, but I'm absolutely
It's
living for it.
very effective.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Gorgeous.
It's just the sun's coming through I mean, obviously you can see it. Anyway.
Get the hand earrings incredibly well now.
Yes.
The hand rings.
The hand rings.
Anyway, that's not my best. To everyone, and Eric, you actually touched on this a little bit earlier. Why was it important for you to be a part of this film?
Well, should I answer first?
Go.
Because I'm the oldest by far.
Yes.
I'm the oldest by far. I'm the closest to the end, as it were. That's another way of looking at it, or the furthest from the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, in any project that I'm involved in, I've first of all, there's kind of two things that are very important to me. The script, I'll read what's being proposed, and that's, I'm not going to embark on something that I don't actually think is, that's not for me. Things. But the other thing is, of course, is association. So with Deb being the author of it about her father, I mean, she's an important person in my professional and as a friend too, but in the profession. This is so I'm also going to pay attention to where the project is coming from and who's written it and those kind of connections. And that, of course, there was no question on both those counts that I wouldn't get involved in this once being invited, and being grateful for that too, and honored.
Lovely.
Paula, I mean, you wrote it. So
it seems odd that I would write it and go,
Right.
I don't want to be involved in this.
It's true.
So I don't know.
Wash my hands of this.
I wash my hands. I would say Paula might have a.
Yeah, I was so, I mean, I was so honored to get this script in my inbox. I could not believe that you, Kinley, and Deb trusted me with something so personal. It was I was in a very particular point in my life. My grandfather had passed away a little while prior, and he raised me with my grandparents and my parents. So I was having a very tough time with it. And Deb and I had spoken about that. And I actually feel like your dad, Deb, and my nono would have really gotten along. And there's a similarity there for sure. So in reading the script, I was so moved. I love stories that have 3 generations in them. That I really particularly love stories that have grandparent and grandchild relationships. So there's so much of it that felt so special. And I was also very honored that you both would trust me with something that was so specific to your experience, Kinley. It really was so moving, and I didn't want to mess it up. I was so nervous, and it was just such a good piece of writing. Also, I knew that it was so good. I mean, Deb, you know, everyone has said this, but there is a reason that everyone says that, because I think it can be very rare that something, you know, where every syllable is not wasted. And it was just very poignant and clear, and all the characters had specific voices. And I think at the root of it, it was so full of love. It was a family that was so loving, and that was seeing each other through different stages of life with such love and heart. And I mean, it's like so special. I cannot believe I got to direct that as my first thing. I mean, I said it before, but I think I've peaked. Like, it really was just this cast, this crew, this script. Like, you're kind of like, it'd be crazy to say no to something like that, but I really took it seriously. And also the idea of getting to work so closely with you, Deb, like, it really felt, I sort of thought of it as a showrunner director relationship, where it's like a shared vision. It really felt like I was so excited to embark on something where we could be, you know, together creating a vision that hopefully felt like it was telling your dad's story and then putting our own spin on it. So it was one of the greatest joys of my career, for sure.
You go, Ken.
No, I was just going to say to Paul, I certainly don't think that this was a peaking for you, but obviously you did do a very beautiful job. So
yes, absolutely.
I'm very lucky you were my leads. All of you. It's so beautiful. Also, every frame, like I would text you, Deb, and be like, I'm crying at the dailies again. It was great. At the monitors, you know, I'm a weeper, everybody. So I was crying a lot at the monitors, but to rewatch everything in my condo and have that hard drive and watch every footage, every frame of footage, it was so good. All three of you were so beautiful. This whole cast was so strong, and I can't believe everyone came out. And Eric, you are so deserving of the award. To go back to that first question, wow, when you won, were we not, Deb, on our feet? The whole room was on their feet, I'd like to add. Everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody was coming up to me after being like, we just watched 30 seconds of Eric, and we know that it's perfect performance. It was pretty special, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And you did a magnificent job of directing it. I would have never thought that this was, you know, that this was a kind of new experience for you at all. It went incredibly well. But I'd like to know, Kinley and Deb, how much, I mean, it's having this experience, I mean, and having the real Junior in your heart and mind also during this whole experience, like that must have been, well, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, I was extremely close to my dad. My dad was exactly what he seems like in the film. He was a magical person who was interested in everybody and everything on earth. He was well read. He was a visual artist. He was in the obituary that I wrote for him in the newspaper, I said, even the birds will miss him, was the last line, because he would say of the winter, oh, I love the winter. The leaves, the trees lose their leaves. And you can see where all the birds were, all the nests were. You can see the shape of the trees. He was that guy. And hysterically funny, I remember someone saying of his funeral, I've never been to a funeral where there were 3 Paul Lynde impersonations by people. And it was hilarious. It was just hilarious. Neil Crone, a well-known actor, I'm sure you all know. He grew up with us. He was my brother's best friend. We lived in the same neighborhood. And Neil told a story of meeting my dad for the first time, coming to our home. And Dad came out from the kitchen and went, which one's Neil? So yeah, it was, I thank COVID for it, because after Dad died and I wrote this full screenplay, and during COVID took a look at it, and found myself bored through some of the sections and going, it was medical jargon and trips to the hospital and diagnoses. And I looked at it and thought, because it was originally called Junior's Giant, One Man's Delightful Dementia. And we lost the rest of it. But that was what occurred to me when I reread it and reread it. Do the snapshot in time. Make it magical. Make it like Up, a short film of Up in this moment, because he did see there were other things. It wasn't just strings, it was sausages, it was hot air balloons. And it wasn't just a giant, it was a little person as well. But I thought, I'm not Fellini, not putting Paula in that position. And it was also cartoon mice who would sit on his toes and dance and sing. They would irritate him sometimes, but he knew he wasn't in harm's way. So I just thought, what a gift that nature gave this man who was so kind and saw only the lovely things, that his dementia was lovely. Because as all of us know from knowing people with it, that it isn't always lovely, and it mostly isn't lovely. And that there are people who were the kindest in the world who had an ugly, dark, because that's all in there. All the darkness of the world is in there. He was just lucky that it didn't come out. So yeah, I don't even remember what the question was, but that's my answer. Oh, Kinley, yeah, you were going to talk about it too.
That's funny. I don't really remember what the question was either, but I have the answer locked in.
Okay, good.
So somehow, hopefully this is all going to work out.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it being a story about my grandfather, there's a piece of it that's healing. And it's healing to explore a reality that unfortunately didn't occur, in that he existed at the time when I had come out. So there's that aspect, and there's also and I've never been able to verbalize this before, but it's it was film. It's a very unique way of processing grief. Not many people get to do that, but to throw yourself into a project like this that tells a story, that's something pretty incredible, and also goes sort of hand in hand with healing as well. So that's my answer.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful answer. That's a very generous and revealing thing to say. Both of
thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's really generous. I mean, the other thing about, that's the one aspect of it, but I think one of the successful things about the script was too that, Deb, you also brought, it wasn't just simply about issues. It wasn't an issue-oriented piece in that sense.
Absolutely.
It was a story. It was a wonderful story, and it had a lot of expertise and storytelling behind it, and that you can see in the script. And that makes it incredibly much more available to people watching it. Is that the conduit of story to it, rather than the conduit of a kind of polemic, a quiet polemic or anything like that. It was, so there was a wonderful art, I'm saying, brought to it, as well as this deep personal connection to it.
Thank
you. And you were wonderful in it. I think you should have got the award myself, but because you're far more deserving than I am.
Okay. So,
but you all kinds of time to get the award. Time is running out for me.
He spent the ACTRA Awards trying to give me the award. I was Eric. You were, well, I just feel it's yours. And so he would not take no for an answer until I told him a story, a possible story that made him laugh, and he finally realized. I said, so you're telling me that I took the award and put it in the living room, folks come over and say, you won an ACTRA Award. No, I did not. Oh, why do you have it here? Well, it's not mine. Actually, it's Eric Peterson's. Well, you got it. Well, he gave it to me, and I friggin' took it. Yeah. So that speaks volumes about and volumes about me. The second story is, in our first day of rehearsal, and God bless Paula, made it so we could budget for a half day of rehearsal with the three of us in our home where we shot, God help me. And Eric said the greatest thing. He sat us down and said, Kinley and Deb, I am not your father. I am not your papa. I am an actor playing a character. I am taking the script you wrote, and I feel that it is in there, but I am not doing an impersonation. I am not, and we said, Eric, we don't expect you to. We want you to bring what you have to this role. Cut to, we're filming in the evening here. Our nephew, my nephew, Connor McGrath, was in film school, so we brought him on as a PA. And I said, Connor, when you're not running to Sobeys for flowers or picking up the pizza or whatever you're doing, please ask people what their job is. Stand behind the monitor. Connor is not an easily emotional guy. He is, but he doesn't show it. So I go to the monitor and he turns to me, bawling his eyes out, and he said, Auntie Deb, he's Papa. And I said, don't tell him. And that's what everyone said. Oh my God. Everyone has said, he's Jim. He's Jim. So whether you intended to or not, Eric, you got my dad's spirit. And I will say my dad was such a fan of yours, and from Billy Bishop, like everything. He would be, and that's what we've talked about, out of his mind.
Yeah.
With pride and joy that you played this part, because he was one of your biggest fans. So it just all ended up the way it was. He's Papa. Shh, Connor. Because he's not.
Walk. He'll walk. He'll go and stand in the garage and won't come in. He'll go to the garage and go.
Exactly.
I'll be out in the lawn.
Yes,
I was
exactly.
going to say I'll be in my Winnebago, but we didn't have one. So
Well, no.
We had the bedroom. We were all up
I'll
in
be
the
down
bedroom.
by the corner.
Corner of the living room and the chair on the couch.
I'll be behind the fridge.
Yes, yeah, that's what we do. For that.
Yeah. So there's my two.
Well, that's just wonderful. That is wonderful. But well, there's a very rich kind of analysis that could be put in place too about how stories work, and especially in the performing arts where we tell something. And so it's always, it's been part of my endless cogitation about this business and about the business of acting. Where does it take place? Does it take place? And I'll just use the theater, for example, because it's a little simpler. Does it take place on the stage? Does it take place, or does it really take place in the audience's mind?
Yeah.
Is that where it's all taking place, or does it take place halfway between in a way?
Mhm.
So again,
Yeah, I love that.
there I am, having never met your dad at all, simply working on a script. But people that knew him then take that information, and it's like, it's like Freshie. You remember that? I'm so old, nobody would remember Freshie. It was a powdered drink, you added water to.
Yes.
And so like I'm doing something there, and it's like Freshie in a way. The people that knew him, they then add the water to it, and my God, you've got a full glass of raspberry, pop here or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that
that's a good analogy.
Yeah. It's a wonderful business how how empathetic and suggestive we are in our business. You do something and it's magnified, it becomes something else. It's some other brain then and imagination comes into play with it. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
And it's terribly poorly paid and can absolutely frightening. But having said all that, it's great fun, and there's the best people.
Yes.
The best people.
Great fun, and there's the best people. It's true. Unfortunately, the general public thinks we're all rich, and it's back to union stuff, especially in this country. That's the main problem, is that they think we're all in fancy Hollywood homes, and that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, there's a definite lack of veritable data for our public here. They think we're all I don't know what, actually doing Canadian stuff. It's a bit like, I think we're like sort of like the Christians in the catacombs, basically, to a certain extent. We're secretly practicing this art, and the general public doesn't even know what's going on. They think we're all in Hollywood, laid right by the pool. And
By the pool, yeah.
I mean, that's of course, as usual with me, hyperbolic and oversimplified, but those are my two main weapons.
That's true. God, that's funny.
Well, what we've been talking about in general actually segues nicely into the next question. We're talking about how the story is personal for my mom and I. As performers, why do you think it's important for us to tell our own stories?
Paula, you go first, because I'll eat up the time. Sulfuric acid on snow or something.
You eating though. I think it's so important. I mean, I think we're in a really exciting time in terms of storytelling. And, I don't know if it was COVID. I don't know if it's that people's appetite for what they're watching has changed, but it's been very exciting to me to see shows from all over the world be so widely received. And I think we're debunking this idea that people only want to see stories that are about their exact experience. It's like specificity is so universal, and seeing stories about other people's very specific experiences, whether it's their, wherever they grew up, in the language that they speak, about their specific coming out story to their family. It is the way that love is shared. It's the way that new stories are shared, and art has always been the thing that has expanded worldview. I think it's like this universal language. So I'm so excited by what I'm seeing happen, even in the last couple of years at TIFF, the new filmmakers coming out of Toronto, and how specific those stories are. And I think the more specific we get, the more universal it gets. So I'm very excited by actors turned writers, multi-hyphenates, because it's like, it is the time. I think we're seeing also a lot of success in those areas. So yes, it's certainly helpful that Issa Rae, who I'm just obsessed with, and what she did with Insecure and now with Project Greenlight, I think we're seeing oh yeah, Issa did it. So let's take a shot on somebody who did this very small web series with their friends. And it's very exciting to just see more and more people daring to tell their own stories. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery, I think, to really tell your own story as well. It's super vulnerable. So when you see someone else do it, I don't know about you, but I'm like, okay, maybe I will write that thing that's deep from my guts. I just think it's a really thrilling time in terms of what I'm seeing get made. And so I think more of that.
On the inverse of that, the idea that the feeling of being a creator and telling your own story, I think it's also exciting to watch that as a viewer, to know
Yes.
how close the material is to someone. And I do think that any given person can tell any given story and can potentially do it well, but I think there's just something, and maybe even a little nuance to when you're that close to it. And that's also a lovely and refreshing thing to see when you're enjoying art. And that's those are my 2 cents about it.
I totally agree.
Wonderful replies, wonderful insights there. I think that, I'm not very articulate about this. There's something about, especially in this country, I mean, and maybe it's, but I can't speak for other countries, because how could I? I'm not there anyway. But in this country, there's always a great tension between originality and copying. And it's one, we tend to think that if we make a movie that's like other things we've seen, and in most cases that's American work, then we all are also doing it. And there's something about having to turn to your own story as at least at some at some point in your work, and usually in the beginning, there's something about turning to your own story that you that is going to make you, and again, this is where there's something happens that this is a point that you have to be original about because it's yours. You know, nobody's ever told this story before. That means told, you know, and again, that gets into, there's whole things about it, but it's an area in which you have to, with whatever abilities you have, come face to face with a story that is only yours. And there's something about, now again, and I can't be any more articulate than that, and so it may be a hopeless thing to say, but I think that that is an incredible deep exercise that has to be done if you want to kind of then progress as an artist and be an artist that can look at other things that not are personal. And you know, it's about a deep kind of original personal look and a personal style in a way, that because you're dealing with this intensely individual world that is only yours in a way, and trying to make a piece of art out of it. I mean, Junior's Giant is a good example of that. And I say this because I often wonder about what's wrong, Deb. What are we, as Deb is having a fit?
There's some swatting going on.
She's going, that is so much horseshit, what Eric is just saying. Out of my way. I want it out of my way. I don't, that guy can bullshit better than anybody I've seen. And that's just horseshit, what he's saying there. I'm sorry. Anyway, so the point I was going to make, like, it seems to me that I've often, you know, when when I see foreign directors working in Hollywood, for example, and I'll say Mexican or Canadian, the Canadian ones are inevitably often from French Canada. They're, you know, Quebecois, and the Mexican ones have also, but everybody's learned their trade by, first of all, telling the specific story of where they were in a way. So in my mind, this is a clue to me that this is somehow a necessary exercise, that you have to be able to actually turn something in your own story, in your own life, into something that's then accessible to everybody else. The specificity you're talking about, Paula, and that universality gets when, and it's, you know, you might not be successful. You might try and tell it like everybody else tells their story, but that exercise is something, I don't know. I'm sorry. I've just given you a whole answer that is pretty vague.
No, it's actually a great answer, very specific and so true. And you bring up French Canadian cinema. They are lucky in a lot of ways. For several reasons. They have their own culture, so they're not comparing themselves to Americans, and we do, because we grew up with Hollywood and the Hollywood films. So they have the freedom, or have taken the freedom. I won't say they were lucky. They took the freedom to tell their own stories, which is why they're unique, which is why they're rich, and they have the culture of the folks in their province who support it wholeheartedly. They have their own industry, which we've never had, because we've always been compared to the American cinema by not only the public, but ourselves. And I remember going once with ACTRA some years ago to protest at, I believe it was CTV, their fall launch, which had nothing Canadian on it. And one woman going in, and we were peaceful protest, but one woman turned around with the ugliest look on her face and screamed, "Nobody wants to see your stuff." And it was just so stunning. We were so taken aback, but that's oh, it's Canadian. I remember for years, that was the fear.
Yeah.
And Quebec is lucky. As I said, not only lucky, but they've taken that ball they've taken that ball and they've run with it. And I think we're doing much better now. And I think it's largely due to the IMPOC community in this country are stepping up and telling their stories, thank God. And again, it's a cultural base. They've got something different to say that isn't being compared to our neighbors to the south. And so they can walk in, and we've all done this when we've pitched, and it's like, well, what's it like? Like, give us the two. Is it, thing meets thing? They're walking in and no one's saying that to them. To your point, Eric, because it doesn't compare to anything. They're telling their own stories, and they're successful because they're stories we need to see. And whether we knew we wanted to see them or not, we want to see them. So I think your point was very well made. And I think slowly we're, as a whole country, going to have confidence in the stories we tell, no matter what the cultural background is. But right now, as far as I can see, the immigrants or the folks who are from a different background other than Anglo-Saxon are holding it up for us, and God bless them, and may they continue to tell these stories. I'm bowing now.
That was good. I should applaud you. I'm on my feet. I know it looks like I'm sitting, but I'm on my feet. That's so inspiring. That was incredible. Well, again, I think that, there's many reasons for this. I think there's a tension in this country. And as there's always been a tension in English Canada. It's like you say, in French Canada, it's much clearer. They have felt under threat culturally. And so that is that's an incredible, and they have this secret code that they use. They don't use English. They use this secret code called French to speak to each other, and it's very important to them. So, and that's reflected in. So there's always been this huge cultural imperative in their business. We have oscillated. When I was first starting out, and street legal and all these things, there was a cultural mandate. It seemed to me with the CBC that we do our own stories, that we tell our own stories now. And that pressure is still there. I mean, I think it's not still there, but and then we went over to a commercial one. And the commercial one that drives the film industry, then that precludes. That means that precludes to a certain extent the kind of originality we're talking about. Yeah. But Paula, you made a good point when you were talking too about the and this is we live by paradoxes and contradictions. This is the same new technology that is threatening us all, our existences, is also responsible for allowing people to not have to go through the gatekeepers anymore that we used to go. And so that kind of commercial gatekeeper, and to a certain extent, you can go below that, because what you're making with the podcast isn't commercial. It's not, that's not the consideration you have to make in the end. It gets to do, you're freer in a way to then express what you want to express. And there'll be original and new ideas because of that. And that's an incredible, that's an incredible thing that we have to cherish in this country, because we are a little kind of vassal state of the, of the larger world, that any bits of our own originality, if we can, exploit them, that's going to be, and we are a country where those things will happen, given the, so in a sense, I'm saying that I think because of this technology and the ability to just go out and make it in a way, it becomes closer to theater, which is my total background, which I grew up in, where you went, we don't want to do British plays, we don't want to do American plays, we want to do our own stuff. And that's still alive and well I say, because, with the inclusion of different people saying we want to tell our stories too, that's totally in keeping with my own experience in this country. We just don't want old white people telling their stories right at the moment, because I've had a chance to do it. But other people are doing the same thing that I did. I want to tell my story. I want to tell my experience in this country. And the larger issue about the dynamic in this country has to do with how close to the United States or how far away from the United States we are. And I suppose that's that's in the Western world, that's everybody's has that issue to a greater or lesser extent. Mexico and us probably have it, the most acute, so far from God, so close to the United States. Isn't that what the Mexicans say or something like that? I mean, whatever that means. It has a meaning for me. I go, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So far from God, so close to the United States. Isn't that?
But I think the advantage we have in Canada, though, regards Mexico, is definitely right beside the US, and that's their culture. That's their culture intake. Certainly when I was growing up, and I think because of the internet now, so many people, I think Canadians have equally, if not, well, equally taken the UK and all their entertainment, all their humor, all their, I feel as a young person with the Pythons and all the different British stuff, I was as influenced, if not more, by the UK than the US. And I definitely think the Canada I grew up in, people always ask, why are there so many people from Canada? I think that's why. Because we got our humor and our influences from two powerhouse entertaining countries.
And I just want to add, I think, because like what's shifting, I also grew up in a neighborhood where most kids spoke different languages. English was my second language. Most kids had immigrated there. So when I started acting, it was a very Asian neighborhood, West Indian, a big Filipino community. My family's Italian. And I remember thinking when I started, acting as a young person, I'd be on set and I'd think, oh, these shows must not be set in Toronto. Like I just didn't see where any of these shows could have possibly been set in Toronto because none of it reflected my experience. So for a long time, I was like, this is some strange other land. And what's exciting me now is to go back to that web series idea. I think we're also in a really interesting time where it's like, who can afford to be creating? Like when you're often looking at what it takes to, when people are like, this is maybe a whole other podcast and a whole other day, but I think a lot about when people say, do you think actors should create? I was asked that doing press on something earlier this year. Should they start producing? I was like, well, absolutely. I think that's amazing. Should you want to and have the resources? And I'm very lucky that I came from years of child acting where I had, the privilege of a lot of access to crew that could come out for me, where I could take a couple of years to start producing indie film, which, spoiler, we all know doesn't pay you anything. But that's a very specific experience, to ask any artist to dive in and take time and do that. So what I'd like to see happen, and I think we're slowly getting there, is resources for artists from marginalized communities. Like, where is there a fund where, your bills are being paid for the next year? Or how can you really afford to create your art? I think is something that needs to be talked about too. And what that really takes. Because yes, I think there's so many ideas that are so exciting. But now what I think is happening is we're seeing, you could create something and put it up on the internet on yourself, and somebody can see it and go, okay, we're going to fund your first project that could really lead to other work. So I think that's what's starting to happen. I think that's why we're seeing stories that are about specific cultures. I think we're seeing stuff that starts to really feel like it's coming from the city too, in a new, very specific way that really, really excites me. And I think, the success of something like Squid Game or the success of something like The Farewell or Crazy Rich Asians, it doesn't surprise me that those worked universally, but I think I come back to that specificity is universal thing where it's like, everyone loved those shows. So now everyone here is like, all right, maybe we can tell things that are very specific and the world will love them. So I'm like excited for all of that. And it does feel like little me is like, okay, now I'm starting to feel like things, feel like they're for a wider audience and they actually feel more specifically Canadian, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, well, they are more specifically Canadian. I mean, I think there's to mistake the Canadian audience for being just one element is what has been has been, that's more time that I came through. And that's been, and that's been challenged, and that's good. It should have been challenged, and not challenged but again, it's all within the same idea that I want to tell my story about my experience in this.
Celebrate
First Nation artwork, film and television is another good example of it. I'm not putting them in the same category as the rest of us settlers. But there's an example of, that there will be great creativity and specificity because they're dealing with their own stuff in a way. And I feel that that's coming. And in the end, in this digitalized world of the internet and internationally, the only thing you have to give to sell to the rest of the world is your specific experience. Yeah. Who needs a copy of an American show in England from Canada? You know what I mean? Give me a break. And that's what we watch from. That's what the big thrill is. We all talk about as our audience in this streaming world is to be able to see stuff from other countries. You go, wow, this is a good and kind of a relief. I'm so out of the dramaturgy of what I'm so used to, and it's exciting to see different things. And I'm hopeful, but again, let's not get overboard here. Let's not go too far on a positive message because it makes me too uncomfortable. I miss the negativity and pessimism of my usual whole.
But and to bring we love a little pessimism too.
Well, the truth is, there's a writer's strike, the commercial things do not like this. This is heresy to them. Paula, you just asked for more money, for Christ's sake. What do you mean you want to have somebody pay your lunches for the whole? What about our profits? What about our profits up to the shareholders?
And yes. Yeah, I know we're in a very
no, we're going to replace you with a machine. It'll do it just as well. It won't do it just as well. It's only machines will watch it then. I'm sorry. The rest of us will be standing on the corner doing plays for each other. Thank you.
Exactly.
Well, and there is a reason that Junior's Giant, like, to bring it back to the script for a moment, I think there's a reason that has resonated with so many people when we're screening it now. And from when I remember sending it to every crew member that we were asking to join us, that I've not really sent a script out before and had crew necessarily comment on the script in that amount. It would be like, we're talking about the deal and the dates. I cannot tell you how many people just were like, have to be a part of this. This script is so beautiful. It's so moving. That's very rare. And like it again, it's that indicator that people really can feel how specific it is. They can tell it's super private. Like there was something that grabbed people from the page. And I think that's why in screening it and being able to watch it in theaters in this sort of like not height of pandemic has been such a gift and we've been at some of them together, these screenings. It's so like, there's this moment, it takes place as we all know, where Junior's an actor. And some of that stuff in the waiting room is my favorite between Kinley, you and Arden. And then Eric, when you come out of the room, and in the second scene, when Eric says, why are they talking to you like you're a girl? There's this line. When you hear that collective gasp, and this has happened many times where the audience is so in it, the heartbreak that the audience collectively feels, it moves me every time. Like they are so invested in this, and they're really, and they love you, Kinley. Like it's they love the both of you, and they love this relationship. It's really, really moving to witness that and feel how everyone just loves these characters. It's special.
Yeah.
And it is like about daring to share something very private. I think is very generous. It's very generous. Thanks to both of you for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
Good stuff.
Oh, good stuff. Yes.
That's all I could say. You were all waiting for me to go into another 25-minute tire.
I was ready. I was ready to hear more.
I think I'm running out of steam. I think I may have emptied my little brain now.
No way.
Yeah, I've come to the end of my.
Give us a stimulating question, Ken.